Let me stop my video before it goes. So, okay. So right now you're live on YouTube, and I'm sharing the link.
Thanks, Sean.
Okay.
Hey, good morning, Shahid and Vidushi. This is Mahesh.
Morning, Mahesh.
Morning, Mahesh.
Vidushi, you're mute. All right, there are people in the waiting room. Oh my God. Okay, there are a lot of people. Gina. For the YouTube live, we just started this session. We're just waiting for people to join. Once everybody joins, I think I will take over and start.
Morning, Anisha.
Vidushi, can you hear me? Can you unmute yourself, please?
Yes, I hear you.
Okay, I'm making the host now.
Okay.
So now you can start adding people once they're in the waiting room and you're on live. So
Okay,
good.
Can you text me the live link also on WhatsApp?
That's on the chat room. That's on the check on the chat room.
Okay. All right. Sounds good.
And I'll also share the link in the home group.
Okay, perfect.
Oh. All right, I'll shut up.
Kai, I have one of my psychiatrist friend who joined today. She's professor at UCLA. Her name is Jenna. She was very excited to hear you. So.
Hi, thank you so much for having me.
Nice to meet you, Jenna.
Nice to meet you as well.
Hey, everybody who's just on audio, would you mind turning on your videos if that's possible? I think it'll be a kind of more interactive environment and a little bit easier to, speak to faces rather than just the screen.
Maybe we can start now, and whoever is late just starts listening wherever they are.
Vidushi, this will be there on YouTube after the session, so people can watch it later too.
I have some slides to share. So do I need to be the host for that?
No, you should be able to share.
Okay. Sorry, just a sec. All right, I can start. Everyone's ready. Ready, set, go. This is the second week of a two-part seminar on the pursuit of spiritual knowledge. So last week we had touched on the following concepts. So what does spiritual knowledge mean, first of all? And then, an explanation around the difference between religion and spirituality, for those who are curious. I think most of us probably have some exposure to religion and, a different relationship with religion, but I think there are more people increasingly who are interested in spirituality. So what exactly is that difference? And then we touched on, some misconceptions around spirituality. I'm not going to dive into those now, but I think there are a bunch. So just trying to kind of correct those and present a different view of spirituality. And then we dove into the human constitution. So when we talk about a human being, what is a human being constituted of? What are the different facets or equipments that a human being contains? When we talk about the human personality, right? We're all human beings. They're all different, they're facets of our personality. What are those facets, and how do we better understand those in order to use them more effectively to live a better life? So today we're going to be diving into these two kind of core concepts. If I'm just kind of an average person living like a normal life, with a career, a family, friends, very much in the world, what do I stand to gain from spirituality? What benefit would I expect to gain from pursuing some of these practices? So how is this perspective that we're going to gain from this spiritual knowledge, how is it going to help me kind of in my day-to-day life as a normal everyday person? So I've outlined 5 or so kind of key themes, and I'll be walking through those just to give you all a sense of, if you're not as familiar with spirituality, what am I gaining through this practice? And then I'll dive into kind of yoga. So this term yoga, which actually comes from a Sanskrit term yuj. What is yoga? What is yuj? What does it mean? And how does it tie into spiritual practice? And I'll explain why it's really the essence of spirituality. So what this term means, and it turns out there are these different yogas, basically to help with different kind of facets of life. And I'll dive into 3 of the main ones. Karma, Bhakti, and Jnana Yoga, to help you really start to apply these practices kind of in a practical way in your life. Hi, everyone who just joined. Welcome. So here's just a little introduction to me. I think most of you know me. Some of you were here last week, so this is a little bit of a repeat. Others know me from kind of just other phases of life. But for those who don't know me, I graduated from Pomona College in 2014. I studied mathematics. Pomona was a liberal arts school, so I was kind of diving into all different facets of knowledge there. But was also really interested in philosophy, and I ended up taking a bit of a deep dive, I would say, into Indian philosophy. I found this ashram, or it's called the Vedanta Academy, near Mumbai, and I ended up studying and completing the 3-year course near Mumbai after my undergrad. So this is kind of my background in spirituality. I was really interested in understanding these concepts and principles at a deeper level because I thought that they would help me in my life. Then I came back to the US to kind of try to integrate these values and ideas that I learned, again, into kind of a normal working life. I wanted to have a career, I wanted to have a family, I got married recently. So I was thinking about, how do I take all of these things that I've learned and my passion for self-development and improvement of the personality, and how do I translate that to a normal life in America, a career, a family, friends, relationships, etc. And since then, I've been doing kind of a range of things. I have a people development role at work in the consulting company that I work in. I've been getting into career and life coaching as well, and teaching Vedanta really since I got back to the US in 2017. And I also got married last year in Nashik. So here's a photo of my wedding, my beautiful wife, who is currently studying at Stanford right now. She's doing a problem set in the other room, so it's not able to join us. But if you keep coming to these classes and sessions, maybe you'll see her eventually too. Vidushi, is your brother on the call today? I had queued up his question from last week.
Not yet. Maybe let's address it.
Should we come back to this later? Maybe at the end?
I've texted him, I've reminded him, but I don't know if he slept late or something. So if he,
Well, we can come back to it later on.
Mhm.
Does anybody, before we kind of jump in, does anybody else have any other questions from last week about anything we discussed? As I mentioned last week, I always encourage everyone to ask questions. I think it's often the most effective way to be an active learner, to really go from just listening to examining the contents of what's being said. And I think the internalization process of gaining a deeper insight into the knowledge is really driven through active questioning. To me, when you start thinking about, how is this said? Why is this said? In what context does this make sense? I think it can help facilitate that deeper level understanding. So I guess that's just a prompt for this week. I would say, as I'm walking through this, I'm going to try to kind of go through the presentation, and I would say write down any questions you have, and we'll try to save some time at the very end to address those. So with that, yeah, here's just a quick recap from last week for those who didn't attend the last session. So again, this seminar, two-part seminar, is on the pursuit of spiritual knowledge. So the first thing to think about or define is, what do we mean by spiritual knowledge? So let's break down these two terms, spiritual knowledge. So when we talk about spiritual knowledge with respect to all these other types of knowledge here, like knowledge of science, physics, you might go to culinary school and get knowledge of how to cook, right? You might be a language expert, or like me, majored in mathematics. These are all different fields of knowledge. Spiritual knowledge, I would say, is primarily concerned with understanding yourself, understanding life, understanding questions around, who am I? When I strip away, or when I kind of disaggregate all these different facets of my identity, is there something that remains or persists kind of in and through all of these changing aspects? And when I ask this question, what am I really seeking in life? Where does the happiness that I'm looking for reside? It's a seemingly simple question, but I think the answer is quite deep. It's not even really an answer. It's a investigation. It's an examination. That process, I think, is a very kind of deep and profound one to begin thinking about, what am I really looking for in life, and where is that really to be found? So that's kind of the subject of spiritual knowledge. Again, as I mentioned before, we're here to analyze, discuss, and question these ideas that we present. I'd say we're also here to come together as a community to support one another in our spiritual development. I mean, just like, if your goal is to be a great surfer or a great athlete, then you create a community of people who are like-minded in that pursuit, and you support one another. So, the other aim here is to really create a community of people who are interested in self-development, or interested in developing themselves, and really support one another in that process. That's actually the meaning of satsang. I don't know if you all have heard that term satsang. It's a Sanskrit word. It actually means, good company, helpful company, truthful company. And that I would say helpful is within the context of what you're working towards. So if you're a business person, satsang for you would be, a bunch of people who are thinking about business, can add business insight. For, if you're interested in self-development, then satsang looks different. So we also talked last week about just the importance of developing yourself. So and why is this? And I had brought up this insight that I'll keep coming back to probably over and over again, but it's this simple observation that in each of our experiences, the kind of object, what we're coming in contact with, keeps changing, right? I mean, right now we're in this class, we're interacting with one another. Before this, we might have been making breakfast, we might have been interacting with our family. After this, we'll go on to some different environment with different people, different kind of objects that we're interacting with. But in every experience, right, the fundamental kind of common denominator is you. Like, you're the main character, right? Throughout the entire kind of narrative arc of your life. Everything around you, in and around you, the people, the things you're contacting will keep changing. But you will kind of remain right in the center. So that insight kind of sheds light on why it's important to actually, develop yourself, to actually work on yourself, your personality. And then it kind of raises the next question, well, what is the human personality? What is the human personality constituted of? And we had talked about these three kind of foundational equipments or aspects. So the physical body, that's like what we're seeing right now. I'm seeing your body, you're seeing one another's physical body, but that's not really the real you. When we talk about knowing somebody, it's not really the physical body, right? There's a personality within, constituted of a mind and intellect. And that mind is kind of the subconscious part of the personality. So constituted of, emotions, preferences, desires, likes and dislikes, just kind of flowing on its own. I say subconscious because that mind is very kind of amorphous. It doesn't have a concrete shape or directionality or dimensionality. It can kind of go kind of wherever it wants to go, to any extent. Like an emotion can, or a desire can grow to any extent and in any direction, either positive or negative. The intellect is the capacity to kind of think, reason, judge, and decide. It's the executive kind of within you. It's the capacity to guide your attention, to guide your mind, to actually discriminate or distinguish between two thoughts or two emotions that are arising and actually choose, okay, this is a more worthwhile place to kind of put my attention. And then deeper than all three of these equipments, we also talked about the self within you, the Atman. I don't know if you've heard that term Atman before, the God principle, the spirit. So beyond the body, beyond the mind, and beyond the intellect, according to Vedanta, according to spirituality, there exists this real self within you that is beyond perception, beyond emotion, beyond thought. It's the kind of baseline. So when I ask you, it's the kind of conscious principle. So we are conscious, right now you are conscious of me, right? You may be conscious of your family. You may be conscious of the screen. So we're talking about that kind of foundational baseline layer, the very capacity to be conscious. So it's not the perception itself, it's the very capacity that is grounding the perception, that is grounding the emotion. What is that awareness principle that's enabling you to feel an emotion or think a thought? So Vedanta is saying that at a deeper level, you are that self, you are that Atman, that conscious capacity, you are God, essentially. And so that's kind of the foundational definition of the human personality, which we'll kind of draw on throughout this talk. So now I'm going to dive into, the first topic for today, which is what are some of the benefits of spirituality to the average person? So why would I kind of pursue this path? What kind of gains would I hope to experience by going down this spiritual path, which, as someone pointed out last time, I think is presented as, it's a path. It's not a kind of shortcut or a quick solution. So there's time and kind of effort involved in developing yourself. I mean, to develop anything, right, it takes time, effort, initiative. To develop your bank account, to develop a relationship. We're talking about developing our own personality. So of course it's going to take time and effort, but this is meant to kind of articulate or elaborate on what are some of the benefits that I'd hope to experience. So the first one that I guess highlight here is financial security. So this really means when we think about richness and poverty, people tend to think about these as kind of a fixed quantity of wealth. So, the millionaire is rich, the poor, the low income person is poor. From a spiritual standpoint, we kind of take it a step further to think about, it's not only the quantity of wealth that I have, but how does that quantity relate to my desires? How does that quantity relate to my lifestyle expectations? How does that quantity relate to the things that I want? So it's really the relationship, how you feel, whether you feel rich or poor, we say is really a relationship between your means and your wants, right? And somebody whose, their lifestyle, their wants are well contained within their means will feel very secure, right? Will feel very satisfied with what they have, no matter what the quantities are. Whereas, you could have a millionaire who their expectation, right, is for, the lifestyle of somebody with 2x the income that they have. And they will therefore feel, much less secure, much less satisfied with what they have, which is kind of in line with this Shakespeare quote here from Hamlet. I don't know if any of you have seen this before, but the guidance is, costly thy habit as thy purse can buy, but not expressed in fancy, so rich not gaudy. So rich means, you live a life kind of that is full, that is, you have everything that you want, but you always keep it within your means. So it's a life in which you don't overextend yourself. You're not kind of pressured by, that desire to keep up with your neighbors or to keep up with, what's popular. You're not, keeping up with the Joneses, as they say. You're kind of making sure that your lifestyle and everything that you have is always well contained within your earning capacity. And then there's no limit to kind of what you can acquire and what you can enjoy. The key here is just to make sure that it's, well within your means. So the Indian wedding is, I think, a good example of people not following this advice, right? People take out loans, people go into, they go bankrupt basically just because they want to, make a certain impression with that wedding. Gaudiness, when we're talking about gaudy, they have to just impress people. They have this notion of what the kind of ideal wedding looks like, and they go, bankrupt for it. So spiritual development, I think, increases both your capacity to act and achieve results, and it actually reduces your dependence on the world. So it's kind of helping on both sides of this equation. When you gain kind of an ability to manage your attention, manage your time, manage yourself, your concentration, your consistency, and your ability to cooperate increases, right? These are kind of foundational ingredients for any type of achievement, for any type of result that you're seeking. And then, on the kind of other side, as you develop spiritually, this is, you have to kind of stick with me here. This is a little bit complicated. Whenever we contact something, right? When I eat an ice cream, you experience happiness, right? From it. The mistake we make is that we always associate the happiness kind of inherent to the ice cream. We kind of attach that notion of happiness to the object. When we step back, we think about, there is no happiness per se in any object or anything that we may project, right, in a desire. If there were happiness in any object, then all of us could contact that same object and experience the same thing, right? But that's not the case. So when you step back, you realize that that happiness you're experiencing through an object or through a person, it's really arising within you. So as you develop spiritually, you start to question, why do I have to be dependent on this object every time to experience this happiness? Is there a way for me to access this happiness directly within me from where it's arising? So I can perhaps, experience that happiness with or without the object. So this is kind of the line of questioning that you get into as you go down the spiritual path. And the whole idea is to become more independent. Happiness without an object, as opposed to, if I have the object, I'm happy. If I don't have it, I'm not. So it's working both ways to kind of increase your capacity and reduce your dependence on the world. The next aspect is kind of at the physical level. So the benefit is, increased energy level, increased dynamism, increased action. As a colleague of mine, and I would say a mentor would say, zeal and zest for life. I think people have a misconception of, the spiritual path as one of kind of resignation, of giving everything up, of being, somebody who just sits around and is relatively inactive. But I would say that the real essence of spirituality is to be somebody who's energetic, who's enthusiastic, from dawn till dusk, is engaged, is dynamic, is here and there, is helping everybody out, is a contributor. So, this is in line with Swami Vivekananda's advice. Some spiritual initiates came up to him. He took one look at them and he said, go play football. Go, develop your physical body first. Be active, be energetic, be dynamic. And the key insight here, I think, is understanding what saps our energy. So this is a really important distinction. Most of us think it's the physical action that actually saps our energy. But when we step back again and think about what actually makes us tired, it's not the physical action, it's the worry, it's the anxiety, it's the stress that we bring into those actions that cause us to have to kind of, take these long breaks, these long vacations, to kind of switch off and do nothing on weekends. So if we can better manage that stress, that anxiety, that worry, which is a separate layer that we add on to the action, then we can be more dynamic and active. So the second aspect here is kind of physical enjoyment of the senses. So there's this kind of law of diminishing marginal return that we talk about on kind of sense contact. So I give you the first chocolate, you really enjoy it, it's amazing. Second piece of chocolate, it's good. Third piece of chocolate, it's okay, it's hovering on, it's going down. Fourth piece of chocolate is, you're pushing it away, you're resisting it, right? So, that's a simple example of this kind of illustration here, that the more you contact something, the kind of less enjoyable it becomes. So the guidance here is you need a healthy amount of moderation and discipline to actually enjoy the senses kind of right through life. You'll have a healthy appetite, for eating, for drinking, for hanging out with friends, for beautiful sights and sounds. Nothing wrong with the senses. We have sense organs to enjoy the senses, but you need a healthy amount of discipline and moderation to kind of keep that enjoyment level right on top through life. So the next one we talk about is kind of at the emotional level. So the benefit here is emotional stability. And this is kind of a funny illustration here. I don't know if anyone recognizes what this is. It's actually like a cleaning apparatus for the whole of a ship. And the point I'm trying to illustrate here is that we have 30,000 thoughts per day. I did the back of the envelope calculation, 30 thoughts per minute, 60 minutes in an hour, 16 waking hours in the day. So it's around 30,000 thoughts per day. And most of us don't have a clue where those thoughts are going. What thoughts and emotions am I entertaining? And the big shift on the spiritual path is to begin to start to be more aware of what thoughts and emotions am I entertaining, And what impact are those actually having on my mindset? What impact are they having on my personality? What impact are they having on the way I look at things? And there's this kind of principle that we come back to, which is as you think, so you become. So, the emotions and thoughts that you're entertaining so innocently every day, they may be negative, they may be positive, whatever, but just kind of innocently, not really thinking it through. Those are shaping, the person you become tomorrow. So, and the nature of life is that, throughout the day we accumulate, negative thoughts, we accumulate stress, we accumulate fatigue, we accumulate anxiety. So this kind of illustration is meant to basically point out, what are we doing to kind of clean our minds? What are we doing to kind of cleanse ourselves of all of these negativities, of all this stress that kind of builds up in our own mind? So, do you have a process of self-reflection or kind of stepping back and examining life that helps, deal with the stress and anxiety that builds up, just like, cleaning the hull of a ship? And then the second piece of this is that everyone is a combination of kind of impulsive and deliberate, based on kind of the relative strength of your mind and intellect. So whenever we execute an action, it's either driven by an emotion, an impulse, a desire. So just examine kind of the words we used. When I ask you why you did something, you might say, I felt like it. I just had an urge to do it. I wanted to do it. I really like it, right? This is all driven by kind of the mind or the intellect. I thought I should do it. It made sense to do it. I should do it, right? A different motivation. It's coming from a different kind of side of you. And so everyone's a combination of these two factors, and they're constantly influencing our actions. So somebody who is 100% mind is purely impulsive. Everything they're doing is just kind of a gut reaction. I felt like it. I had an impulse to do it, so I did it. It's kind of like a child. A child is kind of 100% mind, like a little child. I talked last week about how the intellect only really kicks in by like age 13 or 12. So, a child is just kind of acting on impulses all the time. But, the problem with that is that as adults, our impulses are not always in line, right, with our kind of long-term goals or what we should do. Or if we need to work on a team with people we may not necessarily like, then we may have impulses that are going to negatively kind of impact the team. So, when we analyze kind of how does regret happen, or why does regret happen, it's really because you acted on an impulse in the moment. You acted on, one of these emotions or desires or impulses in the mind. The intellect wasn't available. The intellect becomes available later on after the action, after that kind of aspect of the mind passes, and the intellect realizes, oh shoot, I shouldn't have done that. And then you get that kind of emotion or reaction of regret. So as you develop this capacity to kind of do what needs to be done, do what should be done, do what kind of aligns with your, the logical side of yourself, you will reduce this kind of tendency to regret and act, purely on impulse without channeling it through your kind of thinking capacity. So this is kind of a fun one, intellectual clarity. It's not when I talk about intellectual clarity, it's not erudition, scholarship, ability to memorize a bunch of stuff, by heart a bunch of stuff. What I really mean here is it's kind of the capacity to just understand what should be done in any situation and have the capacity to actually carry that out. So I'm talking about like a generalist, somebody who's generally kind of knowledgeable and capable of just being able to do what needs to be done kind of in any environment, in any situation, with anybody. So they're also kind of universal in the sense that, there's somebody who can connect with anybody. It's kind of disgusting how well they can connect almost. They connect with the in-law, they connect with your friends, they connect with the delivery person, they connect with the executive or the person at the door. So like, up or down, side to side, it doesn't matter. They're like a universal person who just, they understand people and can really connect with anybody. And the other aspect of this is they have a kind of comprehensive value system. So they understand kind of what is important and what is less important in life, and they kind of orient their life around pursuing those things that are important, around pursuing those things that at the end of their life, you know, they're going to look back on and feel like they've lived a fulfilling kind of successful life kind of on their own terms. All right, so the last aspect of this is relationship harmony. The last benefit we can kind of think about here. And there are many more. This is just kind of like a high level sampling. But I think the first insight to kind of start out with here is that most of us live with just a constant focus on ourselves. So, you know, most of us are very kind of self-centered, egocentric is what we would call it. We're always thinking about my needs, what I'm thinking, what am I going to get? You know, first thought that comes into your mind whenever there's a situation, what am I going to get from this, right? So the problem with this kind of approach, right, in any relationship is a relationship involves, you know, two people. It involves kind of blending together the needs, the personalities, the interests of two different people and coming together and kind of working together to support one another. So if you have somebody who is too egocentric, right, too self-centered, their interest isn't going to extend over to the other party. And it's going to be a kind of recipe for disaster in that relationship. So, you know, spirituality, kind of at a fundamental level, it helps reduce your self-centeredness. So it helps reduce this kind of idea in our head that we are kind of at the center of the universe. I mean, I think we've all experienced this when a problem or situation comes up, we tend to kind of see it. It comes up kind of in our lives. We tend to see it like right at the center of the universe, instead of seeing it perhaps that I am just a part, you know, of something bigger. I'm just a part of the whole. I am one of 7 billion, 8 billion people. How many people like see ourselves really in that way? No, we see, you know, I am right at the center. Everyone else is like this tiny little dot around me, kind of insignificant. So it helps reduce that kind of notion. And the second aspect of this is it really teaches us to understand and accept people as they are. So what do I mean by this? I mean, you know, each person has a different personality. Each person has different strengths and weaknesses, different kind of idiosyncrasies, some things we like about them, some things we don't like about them, some things we're kind of relatively indifferent to. Everyone's like an admixture. And a lot of times first of all, we fail to recognize, you know, what is somebody's nature? What are the things that we like about them? What are the things that we don't like about them? What are the things that we're indifferent to? We fail to kind of understand them. And then the next kind of phase of it is accepting them. Because, you know, the insight here is that you can't really change anyone, if that makes sense. I mean, if somebody wants to change, like I can't change any of you. This is a good example. I mean, I would love if you kind of came on this spiritual path with me, right? But I can't really decide that for you. I can do my best to present some of the compelling reasons why you should, or some of the benefits that you might stand to gain. You know, whether you decide to actually take me up on that that's your decision, right? So just like this, and even with your kids, I mean, I think with our kids, we think, oh, I can change them. I can kind of decide what they do. But I'd say it's not really the case. I mean, they have to kind of meet you halfway, right? There's that kind of example of, you know, it has to be meeting halfway, you know, maybe not halfway, maybe it's 70-30, but there has to be some initiative from the other side at least, in order to really, in order for somebody to really change. So that acceptance of people as they are, you know, their whole selves, but, you know, both the aspects you like and don't like about them, kind of that package deal that you get is really important, I think, for kind of maintaining harmonious relationships. And then if they change in a way that is preferable to you, that's great. You know, you'll be happy about that. But as long as you're dependent upon them changing, and they don't change, it's years and years and years go by. I mean, you might experience this with your partner, right? You'll just continue to suffer in and through that whole time period, because you are dependent upon them changing when that's not really in your control at the end of the day. So, you know, that kind of leads into the second point, which is just the importance of leading by example. And, you know, I like to think about it this way too. I think to really change someone, it almost sounds paradoxical, but I think you have to the first thing you have to let go if you want someone to change is that desire, that constant imposition that they might feel from you to change. So let go of that, and it'll increase the likelihood that they kind of change in a way that you're looking for. So this is kind of in line with this famous Swami from India, little known, but just profound person. He had this quotation, which was, you know, the way to gain anything is to first lose it. The way to gain anything is to lose it. So I'll let you sit with that idea a little bit, but moving right along here. So the next, kind of the second portion of this seminar presentation is, what does this term yoga mean? Right, yoga is now kind of a big thing in the West. It's been, you know, fully imported. Lots of yoga studios all over the place. But you know, that's definitely part of yoga, but there's a deeper kind of spiritual connotation and meaning here that's important to understand if we're interested in treading the spiritual path. So first of all, this word yoga is derived from the Sanskrit word yuj. And yuj means to rebind, reconnect, rejoin. Right? Whenever we're talking about rebinding or rejoining, that implies some type of separation, right? That implies some type of, we've lost something. Otherwise, what are we rebinding to? What are we rejoining to? So they're pointing out to us that, hey, you've lost something. And here are some practices. Yogas are basically a set of practices to help you rebind to that which you've lost. And funny enough, the root of religion, this word religion, it comes from the Latin roots religare, which has a very similar meaning to yoga. Religare in Latin means to bind back, to join back. So again, the implication, right, the essence of religion and yoga, spirituality, the very essence of it is that you've lost something. And here are a set of practices, here is a knowledge, here's a subject to help you kind of regain what you've lost, to re-identify what you've lost. And in fact, it's not that you've lost anything, you've just lost recognition of it, right? There's a difference there. So the message is you haven't lost it really, it's still within you, it's still there. We've just lost sight of it kind of through misperception, through misidentification. So what is it that we've lost, I guess is the question here. When they're saying, when these spiritual teachers are saying you've lost something, what is it that they're pointing to that we've lost? And what we've lost is, it's really captured by these two questions. Who are you? And if I ask you, who are you? You know, you might say your name. You might, you know, give me your title or your occupation or your role or, you know, your relationships to your family or to your friends. Right? These are all relative kind of identities that we've picked up. But they're really asking, who are you at a more core foundational level? I can strip away your name, right? A rose by any other name, right? It's just as smells just as sweet, right? So I can strip away your name or any one of these relative identities. They're really getting at what is underneath all that. Is there something more foundational there that really makes up me? When I point at myself and when I say I, what is this I that we're talking about? What is the sense of self that I'm talking about that might be different from all of these relative identities that we pick up? Okay, even in the, I'm taking a layer deeper here. Think about this for a second. So right now we're in the waking state, right? We have a certain notion of who we are, right? We are Ritu or Vivan or Anisha or Vidushi or Kai, right? There's a personality that comes along with that. Like 8 hours ago, you were in a dream, right? And there was no Ritu, there was no Vivan, there was somebody else. There was a different personality. And you were pointing to that personality just as fervently and saying, this is me. When I asked you, who are you? You were pointing to that personality in the dream and saying, this is me. And I asked you, how do you know that? I just know it, man. What are you talking about? How can you question something so fundamental? And then let's take another step back, and we were in deep sleep, right? So there are these three phases that we keep going through: waking, dream, and deep sleep. In the deep sleep phase, it's blackout, right? There's no personality there. So if I asked whoever were there in the deep sleep state, they would say, nobody is there. There's no personality. What are you talking about? This is me, just this blankness. So we keep going through these three kind of different stages. And each time we're pointing to ourselves, this personality, and saying, this is me. But Vedanta, Eastern philosophy kind of as a whole is asking you to take a step back and look at, is there something more foundational or fundamental kind of below these personalities these limited, really kind of temporary personalities that we keep pointing to? The other kind of side of this is, what are we really looking for? And when we take a step back, we realize that everyone is looking for happiness in some shape or form. Happiness, satisfaction, economists would call it utility. Aristotle would call it eudaimonia, which means like a sense of flourishing or kind of being fulfilled kind of at a deep level, right? A masochist would have kind of a slightly different, everybody is looking for something to kind of fill this void that we feel, this sense of dissatisfaction kind of inherently. And the observation is that no matter what you do, no matter what you get in this world, that pursuit of happiness will still remain. That will never be resolved by kind of any external achievement or acquisition or desire fulfillment. And so it's this other question is, the purpose of yoga is to kind of realign ourselves, reacquaint ourselves with that source of happiness that we're looking for. They're claiming is within you. And these practices help us realign or reconnect with that source. And so there are three essential yogas. Because as I mentioned in the beginning, there are three equipments that are going through, constant activity. So with the physical body, we're executing actions. So how do we kind of bring a spiritual flavor? How do we spiritualize those actions? That's the essence of karma yoga, right? Yoga for action. And then with our emotions, we're constantly feeling things. We constantly have emotions passing through our mind. How do we lend a spiritual flavor to those emotions? That's bhakti yoga, yoga of devotion. And jnana yoga is yoga for the intellect. So how do we lend kind of a spiritual flavor to our thinking capacity? That is the purpose of jnana yoga. That's the purpose of a class like this. That's really the essence of gaining spiritual knowledge. How do I understand? How do I gain deeper insight into these questions around who am I? And what am I looking for in life? And where is that, happiness or meaning that I'm looking for? Where does it really reside? That's kind of the subject of jnana yoga. So the last part is just kind of walking us through what is the essence of each of these yogas. And I try to make it pretty practical for us. So we can actually start to apply these yogas. Yogas are really spiritual practices, right? Kind of in our day-to-day lives. So this photo is really this is kind of, I always have this image because, it's everyday things. You're at the airport and you see somebody who's unable to grab their bag right off the carousel. Karma yoga is, what can I do to help? That's all it is. It's basically just, it's always looking to help, looking to contribute, looking to offer something. Versus, that other attitude that people come in with of, how can I really take advantage of the situation? What can I really get out of this person? So it's just a fundamental kind of shift in your motivation. You can't really tell at the action level, right? Somebody may appear to be really unselfish, but they have some ulterior motive in mind. So this is really kind of what is the thought that is motivating your action. It's really just shifting from, you know, this person, we can't really tell if this is Karma Yoga, right? This person may be just doing this to impress, maybe their significant other is behind them and they're just really looking to impress that person, show how helpful they are. So really it's to gain something personal, but you know, if it's really just to help this person, then it's Karma Yoga. So that's the essence of this, kind of at the day-to-day level. What can I do to help others? And we really find with this attitude, it really adds a level of kind of energy, enthusiasm, and connectedness with other people. So just this shift in attitude. And then kind of at a higher level, we can ask kind of, if we're looking at our life, if we're looking at our career, our job, we can ask ourselves the question of what are we really working for? This is kind of a profound question. The whole purpose of Karma Yoga is to kind of shift the purpose for which we work from just ourselves to a larger circle of benefit. So from just myself to, it could be my family. That could be the first layer. So I'm really working for my family. I'm working for something beyond me. And then beyond the family, it could be the community. So I'm really working for the entire community of Burlingame, or really for the entire community of you know, the company in which I work, or the Bay Area, or however large that circle is. But the idea is you keep kind of expanding that circle for which you're really working. And the idea is the larger the circle you're able to kind of accommodate, the more kind of inspiration, the more kind of energy you get. I mean, when you think about somebody like, you know, Gandhi or Martin Luther King or Nelson Mandela, these people were working really for all of humanity. And you see the kind of inspiration and level of energy that they got, you know, from that cause. I mean, we can discuss, you know, various pros and cons of these individuals kind of in their personal life, whatever, but like you can't argue against the cause that they were working for and the level of power and inspiration that they got from that cause. So that's kind of Karma Yoga. And then Bhakti Yoga is really, the purpose of this is kind of to transform the emotional, just the flavor of your personality kind of at the emotional level. This is kind of what this tree is supposed to show. So it's, you know, from something that is, I'd say, you know, Bhakti Yoga means it's the yoga of devotion. And at a high level, I think it is meant to transform, you know, the flavor of your emotions from very entitled, you know, self-pitying and fragile to an emotional kind of resonance that is more appreciative and resilient. So again, there are two steps or two different practices to think about for Bhakti Yoga. First is just kind of cultivating this attitude of appreciation or gratitude. So this is just an interesting thought experiment. When we come home at the end of the day, what do most of us tend to think about? Do we tend to think about you know, all of the great colleagues that we work with and the great facets of their personality and how each of them might inspire us? Or are we more likely to think about just how annoying certain people were and just what a pain in the butt my project manager might be, or, you know, the person who's working beneath me, how kind of lazy and incompetent they are? For most of us, we tend to kind of focus on this negative side, on kind of what's missing, on what's not there. And, you know, the fact is that we have a choice always in life in what we focus on. You know, nobody's life is perfect. It's always kind of an admixture, again, a mix of kind of the good and the bad, the kind of positive and the less desirable aspects. And, you know, there's been a lot of research that shows that cultivating just this gratitude, this reminder of what is being provided to you, of all the people in your life who have kind of contributed to where you are today. You know, they say it takes a village, right, to raise somebody. But I think we don't often kind of think about these facets and are focused on the more negative. So I think it really helps to kind of shift your focus on what you're thinking about, which really helps to actually shift our kind of baseline happiness at a day-to-day level. So that's the first kind of practice. And the second, I think, is where it really goes is, when you're thinking about what I am grateful for, what's being provided to me, that's still kind of an egocentric approach, right? It's still really kind of me focused. So the deeper kind of level of gratitude of bhakti yoga is a more kind of impersonal appreciation or awareness of just the magnificence of the universe, right? Of, all of these laws, all of these physical laws. I mean, even just as a scientist, as a biologist, you can develop a sense of wonderment and awe if you just step back and think about the amazing precision and complexity of these biological processes that are functioning all at once, perfectly, in perfect unison, right, to maintain life, to make life possible. So there's a certain kind of wonderment or awe that we can develop. I'd say it's deeper than appreciation. Appreciation is still kind of, I'm appreciating you, I'm appreciating something, for me. But this is just more of an awareness of, I might call it like an unseen hand, a splash of divinity that is functioning kind of behind the scenes to maintain everything, to make life possible. So jnana yoga, the last yoga here, is really for your intellect. And I think I already touched on this. I kind of jumped the gun here earlier, but it's really this investigation of who are you at a deeper, kind of more foundational level, stripping away all of those layers, stripping away the masks, as they call it. And then what are we really looking for in life and how to pursue it? I mean, I said earlier, we're all looking for happiness. We're all looking for satisfaction. But what's really going to bring us that is the question. It's important to recognize that, we all live in a society, a culture that is just constantly pushing, materialistic, physical beauty, the importance of physical beauty, all of these kind of values upon us. And it's very easy to kind of just fall in line, to kind of adopt those values passively. But, the question remains, at the end of life, at the end of everything, are those really going to be the ones that satisfy us? Is pursuing more of that really going to make our life as kind of meaningful and fulfilled and satisfying as we're looking for? And so that's really a deeper investigation into what is a value system that's more authentic and more likely to deliver what I'm looking for in terms of happiness, satisfaction, and meaning. And how do I go about cultivating that value system? That's the kind of investigation that we're after through jnana yoga. So that's all I have for today. In terms of what's next, I have a couple different offerings for you all. So I thought about, I have enjoyed this couple rounds of seminars the past couple of weeks. It's been pretty fun. So I am prepared to offer a similar kind of, two-part seminar probably at the end of October. So, you can stay tuned if you're interested in coming back for that. And the other offering I have is, if you're interested in exploring some of these concepts at a more personal kind of day-to-day level, I also offer coaching. So I'm prepared to extend a complimentary one-on-one coaching session to any of you if you're interested in talking about how you can implement some of these ideas kind of in your day-to-day life and start to build some of the habits and practices that we're talking about, and really integrate them into your life, for the long term. So my contact information is here. You can feel free to reach out to me if you're interested in setting up a call. So with that, I will turn it over to any of you with questions or comments that you might have.
Hi,
We have 15 more minutes or so.
Anshul is online. He's listening on YouTube, so you could answer his question, and he's listening.
Oh, great. What was your brother's name again? Is it Anshul? Hey, Anshul. Thank you for this question. I thought it was quite apt. It was a great question. So his question was from last week. It seems my intellect is quite developed when I'm writing papers or programming. So basically in work, but not when handling my personal life. So we talk about this intellect as this capacity to kind of think, reason, and guide your personality. And he's saying it's quite developed, in work, but not, in my personal life. And so how do I explore this paradox is the question. So the way I would think about this, Anshul, is you can think about your intellect as kind of a capacity, right? It's like a muscle. This is often an analogy we use. And that muscle has a certain strength, right? If you use it more, if you develop it more, it becomes stronger. It can handle more situations. It can handle a wider range of emotions and reactions that might arise in your mind. So what I would guess is that the challenges, the different emotions and expectations and desires that are arising at work are easier than the ones that are arising in your personal life. So the muscle may be kind of at level 6 right now. And maybe all the challenges that are arising at work are within 6. But maybe in your personal life, you might have some, really difficult situations that surpass 6, that go beyond 6, that are maybe an 8. So, there are 2 ways of tackling that. You either need to understand why those are innate. A lot of times we have expectations, we have certain things that have built up that are now really difficult to deal with. So understand why those may be innate and kind of tackle them head on, and also kind of develop your intellect, develop that capacity to handle a wider range of situations, by understanding your mind, understanding its tendencies, and over time you will be able to handle a wider range of situations. Your capacity will grow from like a 6 to an 8. The other thing is that I had here is that, at work, a lot of us, we have other desires to kind of, behave professionally, to get along with people. There's an added pressure, I think, for us to, be nice, for us to be well behaved, that we don't necessarily have at home in our personal lives with people that we kind of, I think have a tendency to kind of take for granted more. So, sometimes with that kind of professional environment, the relationships aren't as charged or loaded because we have that added extra pressure because we're in a professional environment, if that makes sense. So that is the answer I would give. Is there any way of kind of asking him if that's satisfying, or if he has any follow-up questions to that, Vidushi? I guess in the meantime, does anyone else have any other questions from today?
Hey Kai, my name is Krishna.
Hey Krishna.
I'm a yoga teacher and I explore the Vedic texts, Upanishads, as well as other religious texts like Bible and Quran.
I'm having a hard time hearing you, Krishna. A little bit. You want to try again? Otherwise, maybe you can just write your question in. But why don't you try again?
Okay.
Yeah, it's still not great. So I think he might have jumped off, got kicked off.
I have a question.
Okay.
I'm sorry, am I hogging all the attention?
No, please.
Okay, so, whenever somebody says, like, for example, just picking, Anshul's answer, that strengthen that capacity, let go of expectations, be better, prepare yourself. Those things are so much easier said than done. So, I think, how to go about getting there, like, what's the path to actually to go from knowing I need to do this to doing it?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think that kind of relates to our discussion last week on knowledge versus wisdom. You're saying, I know how, I've heard all these, Hidushi's a longer time student. She's heard all of these things. We've all heard these things, but there's still a gap, right, between what we know and what we're able to kind of embody or carry out or execute kind of, you know, in the heat of the moment. We still kind of, we still give into these tendencies that we have. And so I think the question is how to make myself actually kind of carry out what I know I should do in the moment. And I mean, when I say let go of the expectation of your family doing things a certain way, I guess what I mean by that is it's going back to that. So just to back up, the way we convert knowledge to wisdom is actually, there's two kind of steps to it. You reflect and then you experience what you've reflected on. So when I say let go of that expectation of your family doing things a certain way that you don't like, what it means is to go back to that principle that I had mentioned in the relationship part of the talk, that you cannot change anybody. That is the theorem, that is the principle. If they change, okay, you can go 90% of the way there, but they have to be willing to go that 10% at least in order to change. That's the theorem. There's nothing you can do to really force someone to go 10% of the way there. That has to be there. They have to be in the right, you know, frame of mind. They have to be in the right time of their life. They have to be ready for it. It's just like I can't really guarantee that any of you come back to the next talk, right? You have to be kind of ready for it and wanting to do that. So it's reflecting back, it's reflecting over and over again, Vidushi, on that concept. There's still a gap. It's not deep enough within me yet. I haven't internalized that. If I'm still reacting and getting mad and saying, why aren't they doing this the way I want them to, right? It's that I know it, but I don't really know it, right, at a deeper level. So it's going back to that concept and reflecting on it. I mean, for me, I like to write about these things. I like to kind of almost write out an essay, exploring, okay, why am I getting upset? What is my expectation here? Why is that coming? Where is the misperception here? Where is that misaligned with kind of, you know, these principles that I know? And how do I realign my expectation? And I do that all the time. So the self-reflection process, it's not easy, as I was saying. I mean, it takes, there's no easy trick here. Like you were saying, it's really hard to change behavior. I mean, we all know this. It's like one of the hardest things in life to like actually change, you know, somebody else's or your behavior. So it takes, what I'm saying is that it takes constant reflection. Going back to that, and one day the penny drops, as they say. Hard to articulate what that means, but one day, all of a sudden, you don't react, you don't snap when your kid misbehaves or reacts in a certain way. One day that tendency, it's like the pipette, you know, in a chemistry experiment. You keep adding a drop of solution. And it's only after like the 100th drop that the color changes all of a sudden. Each of those drops was contributing to that eventual color change, but it wasn't really visible. The impact of that effort wasn't really visible until you know, much later on. So there has to be an initial commitment to doing that reflection, to understanding these pretty simple but profound concepts at a deeper level, and then you start to see the impact of those principles in your day-to-day life and your experiences.
Mm-hmm. Okay. There is a question by Ritu. When you speak of karma yoga, how do I tell that the help I'm trying to provide might be unwelcome?
Well, you can see in the reaction is one. Ritu, you want to give a little more context? Do you have kind of a situation in mind?
Well, I mean, not necessarily a particular situation, but just to make sure that it is, you know, obviously, if I'm coming from a place of wanting to be mindful of where can I help, as trying to cultivate that habit more, I also certainly don't want to cross comfort limits of the other. Doesn't matter how good my intention is.
Right.
And to make sure the other is not just being polite. Yes, you're right, I can watch for cues, but you know, more important, is there a situation where, you know, if someone needs it, they come to you and you kind of leave them alone, versus
Totally. I mean,
oh, let me help.
I mean, a great example is like sometimes you need to let people figure things out on their own. Like that's also a part of their own development, their own growing up. You know, kids kind of how far you let your kids go in terms of the rope you give them and the mistakes that they make is a great example of that. Right? Helping them doesn't always mean kind of being the one who kind of is the savior who flies in at the very end and kind of prevents them from making any mistakes and you know, being exposed to the lessons learned from that, right? So that's a great example. So it always requires a bit of assessment, I would say, of the other person's situation, of the other person's personality, of the cultural context I'm in. I mean, India versus the US, it's very different in terms of just, you know, people's level of kind of independence and their kind of openness to help and just what that all looks like. So I would say, you know, that urge to help is great, but it always needs to kind of be coupled with an assessment of the other person to make sure that it's something that's going to be welcome and actually beneficial.
Makes sense. Thank you.
If I may add something, sometimes you just need to ask the person if they want some help. And that clarifies a lot of things that you might be thinking about. So just ask when you have the intent, just ask. Okay, next question. And I got a response from Anshul, so I'll go over that last. How does one, so from Vivan, how does one practice Jnana and Bhakti Yoga? Daily exercise or slow development of mindfulness and intentionality over time? Question mark.
Yeah, Bhakti Yoga, you can start a gratitude journal, I think, is one really easy way to start that. You know, every week, every couple of weeks, I mean, every day even. Some people like start just, you know, first 5 minutes of their day. And it flavors their day in a different way. You know, that when you are reminded of those things that you have to be grateful for, I think it sets your day off just on a different course than, you know, all the things that are missing, all the things that are annoying about my life. That, you know, sets your day off on a different direction. So that's one way you can start with Bhakti Yoga. I mean, the essence of that is right, gratitude, which then developed into like a deeper, less kind of me-focused gratitude and more of just an awareness of what is the power within me that really sustains my life. You know, I mean, I put a piece of food in my mouth and there are all these powers. I mean, you know, we have all these ways in Western science now of describing all these processes, but like, it has nothing really to do with what I am doing. It's just, it all happens like magically almost. So it's like a deeper awareness of, you know, the power that's kind of functioning behind the scenes and a connection really to it. So that's Bhakti Yoga. And I'd say the way to start that is a gratitude journal. And Jnana Yoga, I would say, the best way to do that is to study a scripture. And a scripture, I have a very liberal definition of what I mean by scripture. Scripture is any source of knowledge that provides kind of a comprehensive view or explanation of, you know, all different facets of life, from birth to death to where do I find happiness, to who am I, all these kind of foundational questions that span, you know, all the different experiences in life. Any book that really addresses those topics, I would call it a scripture.
That makes sense. Thanks, Scott.
And so the response from Anshul about this answer was, I can relate with this answer. I'm happy with my family life for the most part, but not with my inner life. Pressure to be nice is certainly there at work, and that in a way helps, but I am usually not as nice with myself.
That's a great point. I mean, I think the Bhakti Yoga, I think that appreciation and gratitude should also extend to yourself. It's kind of weird to think about. I mean, when we say everything, you are a part of everything as well. And I might have to think more about that one. Does anyone else have any suggestions for how to be kinder to yourself? I don't have a great answer.
I think Bhakti Yoga is more of a surrender rather than just gratitude. When you surrender yourself completely, the gratitude is part of the being surrendering. When you have the complete surrenderness, you also develop the gratitude. The gratitude comes from the surrender. I mean, vice versa, actually. Does it make sense?
Yeah, that's a good point.
Yeah.
I think being nicer to yourself comes from, you have to, so what reasons do you have to self-reflection, right? What reasons do you have to not be nice to yourself? What are your expectations from yourself that you're not meeting? And why do you have those expectations on yourself, especially if you're not meeting them somehow, or finding a way to meet those expectations, you know, whatever kind of, I think being nicer to yourself starts with self-reflection. Like why should I love myself? Why should I love the universe? And kind of myself as a part of that. That's kind of how I see it, as being nice to yourself, like at least the way to be nicer to yourself.
Stop being a perfectionist.
Yes, being a perfectionist is really hard.
I think the self-acceptance is the main thing that will make you more kinder and nicer to you. When you accept yourself as what you are, and also accept that you are part of the universe. For most of us, I think, I mean, for being a human being, we are very self-centered. Like, you know, basically we think the entire the universe, I mean, the universe is around us, but we fail to understand the simple fundamental that we are just a minute part of this entire universe, and we have to flow with the rest of the force. But the moment when we turn that around, we try to be caught into the desires, like, you know, where we want everything to be for us. That's where we start self-criticizing and, like, you know, turning against ourselves. I think that's what my thought.
Yeah, that's a beautiful one. Another one that I might add is, you know, we often talk about focusing less on, I mean, one of the foundational purpose of spirituality is to just reduce the focus on yourself.
Yeah.
All the time we're thinking about me, am I doing good enough? So it's, I think the goal is to just reduce the focus on both on the high and low side. Am I, you know, I am big, I'm a big person, I am great, I'm all this, or like I am nothing. I think that the goal is to reduce both of these sides and just to kind of see yourself as another person who is, you know, playing out your roles kind of to the best of your ability in life. I have these roles. I'm a father, I'm a family member, I'm a part of this company, and I have a skill, I have a way to contribute, and let me just do this. Let me just give this talk to the best of my ability and not worry too much about anything else. Let me just play my role. to the best. And I think that helps take some of the pressure off of, thinking about yourself. If you just focus on what is the role and how can I just focus on doing my best in it. All right, we're a couple minutes over.
A quick question for you, Kai. So I'm a yoga teacher and I have some exposure to the Vedas and Upanishads, as well as to the other religious scriptures, and also independent works of Ramana Maharshi and Nisargadatta Maharaj. I'm just curious, what are the foundational texts you study?
Yeah, good question. Bhagavad Gita, 4 or 5 of the Upanishads, Kena Upanishad, Kaivalya.
All the 11, okay.
Yeah, Bhaja Govindam and Atma Bodha by Adi Shankaracharya. And then some of the works by Swami Parthasarathi, who is my guru in India. Okay. So he's done some work to translate and
he's
interpret.
Also based on Advaita or?
Yeah, Advaita Vedanta.
Okay. Thank you.
All right, should we wrap up?
I think so.
Great session. Lots of people joined. Thanks everybody for coming.
Thank you, Vidushi, for organizing.
Yes, thank you. Thank you both.
Thank you. Thanks a lot.
My pleasure.
Thank you, everyone. Take
Thank
care.
you so much. It was wonderful.
Thank you, Mona.
Bye.
Bye-bye.